From now, a peaceful and orderly transformation will take place, but at the same time deep and radical, because it will end the corruption and impunity that prevent the rebirth of Mexico. If we define in a few words the three great transformations of our history, we could summarize that in independence we fought to abolish slavery and achieve national sovereignty, in the reform for the predominance of civil power and for the restoration of the republic. And in the revolution our people and their extraordinary leaders fought for justice and for democracy. Now, we want to turn honesty and fraternity into a way of life and government. It is not a rhetorical or propaganda issue. These postulates are based on the conviction that the Mexican crisis originated, not only because of the failure of the neoliberal economic model applied in the last 36 years, but also because of the predominance in this period of the most filthy public and private corruption. In other words, as we have repeated for many years, nothing has harmed Mexico more than the dishonesty of the rulers and the small minority that has made a profit with influentialism. That is the main cause of economic and social inequality, and also of the insecurity and violence we suffer. Regarding the inefficiency of the neoliberal economic model, suffice it to say that even in quantitative terms it has not produced good results. Remember that after the violent stage of the revolution, from the 30s to the 70s of the last century, that is, for 40 years, Mexico's economy grew at an average annual rate of 5%. And during that same period, in two consecutive 6-year terms, from 1958 to 1970, when he was finance minister Antonio Ortiz Mina, the country's economy not only grew at 6% per year, but this progress was obtained without inflation and without an increase in public debt. By the way, Ortiz Mina was not an economist but a lawyer. Subsequently there were two governments, from 1970 to 1982, in which the economy also grew at an annual rate of 6%, but with serious macroeconomic imbalances, that is, with inflation and indebtedness. As for the economic policy applied during the neoliberal period, from 1983 to date, it has been the most inefficient in the modern history of Mexico. During this time, the economy has grown by 2% annually, and because of this, as well as the tremendous concentration of income in a few hands, the majority of the population has been impoverished until they are taken to seek life in informality, to emigrate massively of the national territory or to take the path of antisocial behaviors. I say it with realism and without ideological prejudices, neoliberal economic policy has been a disaster, a calamity for the public life of the country. For example, the energy reform, which they told us would come to save us, has only meant the fall in oil production and the excessive increase in the prices of gasoline, gas, and electricity. When the energy reform was approved 4 years ago, it was stated that foreign investment would be obtained in abundance, as never before. The result is that only $760 million of foreign capital arrived, which only represents 1.9% of the incipient public investment made by Pemex in the same period, and only 0.7% of the promised investment. In the recitals of the laws passed at that time it was assured that in that year we were going to be producing 3 million barrels per day, and the reality is that we are extracting only 1,763,000 barrels per day. That is, 41% less than estimated and with a downward trend. The damage caused to the national energy sector during neoliberalism is so serious that we are not only the oil country that imports the most gasoline in the world, but now we are already buying crude oil to supply the only 6 refineries that barely survive. He says that precisely for 40 years a new refinery has not been built in the country. Here I add other balances of neoliberal or neo-porfirist economic policy. The corn is native to Mexico, that blessed plant, and we are the nation that imports corn most in the world. Before neoliberalism we produced and were self-sufficient in gasoline, diesel, gas, electricity. Now we buy more than half of what we consume from these inputs. In this period the purchasing power of the minimum wage has deteriorated by 60% and the salary of Mexicans is one of the lowest in the world. We have twice as many diabetes patients compared to Latin American countries. During the neoliberal period we became the second country in the world with greater migration. 24 million Mexicans live and work in the United States. And as for violence, we are in the first places in the world. According to the latest measurement of Transparency International, we occupy the 135th place compared to 176 countries evaluated. We occupy the 135th place in corruption, among 176 countries evaluated, and we moved to that site after being in 59th place in 2000, climbing to 70 in 2006, climbing to 106 in 2012 and arriving in 2017 to the shameful position in which we meet. That's why I insist. The hallmark of neoliberalism is corruption. It sounds strong, but privatization has been synonymous with corruption in Mexico. Unfortunately, this evil has almost always existed in our country, but what happened during the neoliberal period is unprecedented in these times, that the system as a whole has operated for corruption. Political power and economic power have fed and nurtured each other, and the theft of the assets of the people and the wealth of the nation has been implemented as a modus operandi. At the time of the call, or the so-called stabilizing, or shared, development that goes from the 30s to the 70s of the last century, the rulers did not dare to privatize the ejido lands, the forests, the beaches, the railroads, the telecommunications, mines, the electricity industry, much less to alienate oil, but in the last 3 decades the highest authorities have dedicated themselves, as in the Porfiriato, to concession the territory and transfer companies and public goods, and even functions of the state to national and foreign individuals. It is not, as before, individual criminal acts, or a network of complicities to do business under government protection. In the neoliberal period, corruption became the main function of political power, so if you ask me to express in a sentence the plan of the new government, I answer, end corruption and impunity. But contrary to what might be assumed, this new stage is going to start without chasing anyone because we do not bet on the circus or simulation. We want to truly regenerate the public life of Mexico. In addition, being honest, as we are, if we open records we would stop limiting ourselves to looking for scapegoats, as has always been done, and we would have to start with those of mere above, both from the public and private sectors. There would not be enough judgments or prisons, and the most delicate, most serious, we would put the country in a dynamic of fracture, conflict, and confrontation, and this would lead us to consume the time, energy, and resources we need to undertake the true and radical regeneration of the public life of Mexico, the construction of a new homeland, the economic recovery and the pacification of the country. We are facing a political state issue, and as such we must face it. I defined my position about it clearly since the campaign. I said that it is not my strong revenge, and that, although I do not forget, I am in favor of forgiveness and indulgence. In addition, and this is very important, I think precisely that in the field of justice the mistakes of the past can be punished, but the fundamental thing is to avoid the crimes of the future. Consequently, I propose to the people of Mexico that we put an end to this horrible story and better begin again, in other words, that there is no persecution of officials of the past, and that the authorities in charge vent in absolute freedom. That the authorities in charge vent the pending issues in absolute freedom. By the way, today a truth commission is constituted to punish the abuses of authority, to address the case of the missing young people of Ayotzinapa. That those responsible are punished, but that the presidency refrain from requesting investigations against those who have held public office or engaged in business under cover of power during the neoliberal period. From my point of view, in the present circumstances the condemnation of the neoliberal regime is more severe and effective, to make clear its manifest failure and its obvious corruption, and to do everything we can to abolish the neoliberal regime and submit to judicial proceedings or trials summaries to their personalities, who ultimately are still minors in the hope of an entire people and the strength of a nation like ours. But, in any case, as in all matters of transcendence for the public life of the country, I will defend with freedom and arguments my position of the final point in of thinking and working towards the future, but citizenship will have the last word, because all these matters are going to consult the citizens. I also clarify that if my proposal to keep the executive branch out of this matter is accepted, such determination will be applied to those before and for those who leave, not for us, who will keep the ideal and practice of honesty high. I begin by informing that we have promoted a law to turn corruption into a serious crime, which, although it seems incredible, was not. In accordance with my convictions and in the use of my faculties, I agree not to steal and not allow anyone to take advantage of their position or position to steal assets from the treasury or do business under the protection of public power. This applies to friends, applies to wrestling partners and family members. I make it clear that if my loved ones, my wife, or my children commit a crime, they should be judged like any other citizen. I only answer for my son Jesus, for being a minor. As for my person, I have promoted for years the reform of Article 108 of the Constitution to eliminate impunity and the privileges of high public officials, starting with the President of the Republic, who now, according to the law initiative that this day, I am sending to the Senate, may be the President of the Republic judged as any citizen for any crime, even while in office. A good judge by the House begins. We will put order in the dome of power, because corruption is promoted and practiced primarily from the top to the lower levels. That is, we will clean the government of corruption from top to bottom, as the stairs are cleaned. The other hallmark of the new government will be the separation of economic power from political power. The government will no longer be a simple facilitator for looting, as has been happening. The government is no longer going to be a committee at the service of a rapacious minority. It will represent rich and poor, believers and free thinkers, and all Mexican and Mexican women, regardless of ideologies, sexual orientation, culture, language, place of origin, educational level, or socio-economic position. There will be an authentic rule of law, as the phrase of our 19th century liberals sums it up, apart from the law, nothing, and above the law nobody. We will also move towards a true democracy, the shameful tradition of electoral fraud will end. The elections will be clean and free and whoever uses public or private resources to buy votes and traffic with the poverty of the people or whoever uses the budget to favor candidates or parties, will go to jail without bail. The fight against corruption and austerity will allow us to release enough funds, more than we imagine, much more, to boost the development of Mexico. With this simple formula to end corruption and implement Republican austerity, there will be no need to increase taxes in real terms, and that is a commitment that I am making, nor will fuel prices increase beyond inflation. Now it turns out that those who raised the price of gasoline are asking for it to go down. I make the responsible commitment, that soon, very soon, when we finish the refinery that we are going to build in Mexico and 6 refineries are rehabilitated, the price of gasoline and all fuels will go down. Nor, that is heard well and that is heard far, we will not borrow the country. When the 6-year term of President Fox ended, the public debt, this is unknown, but it is worth remembering, was $1.7 billion. When the Calderon government left, the debt increased to $5.2 billion, more than 200%. And in those 6 years it was when more money was received for the sale of oil abroad and everything was wasted or left by the pipe of corruption. Now the debt is $10 billion. Nothing more to pay for the service of this huge debt we have to allocate from next year's budget, around 800 billion pesos. Therefore, public debt will no longer increase. That is our commitment. We will not spend more than you enter the public estate. Contracts signed by previous governments will be respected, but there will be no more corruption or influence in negotiations with private companies. I promise, and I am a man of my word, that the investments of national and foreign shareholders will be safe and conditions will be created even to obtain good returns, because in Mexico there will be honesty, rule of law, clear rules, economic growth, and there will be trust. I also reiterate that the autonomy of the Bank of Mexico will be respected. We are preparing next year's budget, and thanks to the savings that we will obtain with the fight against corruption and with the application of austerity measures, public investment will be increased to rescue the oil industry and the electrical industry. We will promote productive projects with public and private, national, and foreign investment. These projects will be created as development curtains from south to north of the country, to retain Mexicans in their places of origin. We want migration to be optional, not mandatory. We are going to make the Mexicans have jobs, prosper and be happy where they were born, where their relatives, customs, and cultures are. Therefore, the Mayan train will be built, 1 million hectares of fruit and timber trees will be planted in the south-southeast. The existing refineries will be rehabilitated, as I have already said, and we will make a new refinery in Dos Bocas, Paraiso, Tabasco, to stop buying gasoline abroad. In the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, the creation of a railroad for a freight container train will be promoted, and the ports of Salina Cruz and Coatzacoalcos will be expanded, to communicate in less time to the countries of Asia with the east coast of the United States. In this corridor there will be electricity and gas at low prices, as well as tax subsidies for the installation of factories and job creation. In 3 years it will be working. I'm tired, goose, in addition to the current one, the new airport in Mexico City, with 2 additional runways at the Santa Lucia Air Base. Likewise, the free zone will enter into force on January 1st, 180,000 kilometers along the border with the United States. This 25-kilometer wide strip will become the largest free zone in the world. There the same taxes will be charged and energy costs will cost the same as in California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, of the American Union. In other words, in this strip. The first day of January. In other words, in this range the VAT will be reduced from 16 to 8%. The income tax will go down to 20%. Gasoline, gas, and electricity will cost less than in the rest of the country, and the minimum wage will be doubled. This will be the last development curtain to retain our countrymen with work and well-being in the national territory. As for the well-being of our people, the plan is to fight poverty and marginalization, as has never been done in history. Today I formally present to this Congress constitutional reforms, projects to reform the Constitution, to establish the welfare state and guarantee the people's right to health, education, and social security. We will set aside neoliberal hypocrisy. The state will deal with reducing social inequalities. Social justice will not continue to be displaced from the government's agenda. Those who are born poor will not be condemned to die poor. All human beings have the right to live and be happy. It is inhuman to use the government to defend private interests and vanish it when it comes to protecting the benefit of the majority. It is not lawful, it is not fair play to defend the power of the state to rescue bankrupt financial institutions and consider it a burden when seeking to promote the welfare of the needy. It is pertinent, therefore, to state clearly that we are going to attend and respect everyone. That we will govern for all, but that we will give preference to the vulnerable and the dispossessed. For the good of all, first the poor. Our usual slogan is, as of today, the principle of government. I list some actions. The so-called educational reform will be cancelled. The National Institute for the Care of Indigenous Peoples will be created. It will immediately start the free medical care and medication program in the marginalized areas of the country, and this free medical care and medication program will become universal throughout the country, in the middle of the sexennium. It is my commitment. Increases to the minimum wage will not be set below inflation as it happened in the neoliberal period. In 2,300,000 young people will be hired to work as apprentices in workshops, companies, shops, and various productive or social tasks, and they will be paid a salary while they train 3,600 pesos per month. There will be no ninis anymore. They are not going to turn their backs on young people or be offended by calling them that way, because it is not their fault that they do not have the opportunity to work and study. 10 million scholarships will be awarded to students at all levels of schooling, 100 public universities will be created, sports and artistic activities, science, and technology will be encouraged. The pension for the elderly, which was a creation of our movement, the pension program for the elderly will increase, that pension will double, and will have a universal character. That is, retirees, pensioners from Saint and insurance will also receive this support. 1 million people with disabilities or with different abilities will have a pension equal to that of older adults. Those affected by the earthquakes will be taken care of immediately. Credits will be granted to farmers, ranchers, fishermen, workshop owners, artisans, small merchants, entrepreneurs. Farm producers will be assisted with subsidies and guarantee prices, and a basket of basic foods to combat malnutrition and hunger will be sold at a fair price. It is important to specify that the recipients of these programs will receive what corresponds to them directly, personalized, without intermediaries, with the purpose that there is no manipulation of the support for electoral purposes, and that these supports, without moches, reach their full beneficiaries, no undue commissions. We will also avoid environmental effects. I take this opportunity to reiterate that fracking or transgenics will not be allowed. How the need to undertake these and other actions will be understood explains and justifies the Republican austerity plan to which we have committed ourselves, and which, incidentally, does not mean, as is thought in other countries, a mere set of adjustments in the productive and social expenditure of the budget. Here we understand it not only as an administrative matter, but as a policy of principles, since it implies ending the privileges of high bureaucracy. Juarez said that the officials should learn to live in the right mediation, and we argue that there can be no rich government with poor people. Therefore, the salaries of senior public officials will fall. That law has already been passed in this Congress, in this legislature. They will lower the salaries of those above, because they will increase the salaries of those below. There will no longer be a private medical service for senior public officials. Only 5 billion pesos were allocated for the payment of medical services to senior public officials. There will no longer be special savings banks for senior public officials. There is no more, that law has already been passed. No one may travel in private airplanes or helicopters at the expense of public money. From next Monday, the presidential aircraft and the entire fleet of airplanes and helicopters will be put up for the use of senior officials. The President of the Republic will earn 40% of what the outgoing president received. There will be no vehicle purchases for officials. It will reduce government advertising spending by 50%. Administrative units in the country will be reduced and there will be no government offices abroad, except of course, embassies and consulates. The 8,000 elements of the general staff that were destined to take care of the president and the 3,200 agents of the interior, until yesterday dedicated to espionage, will become part of the National Guard. I will not live in Los Pinos, and that official residence has already been opened, from today, to the public and will be integrated into the Chapultepec forest to become one of the largest and most interesting spaces in the world for art and culture. Another important change will be the creation of the National Guard, if authorized by the people and the legislative power, to face the serious problem of insecurity and violence we suffer. This means rethinking the role of the armed forces in the face of the ineffectiveness of police corporations. It is essential to accept that the federal police, created 20 years ago to replace the work of the armed forces in the fight against crime, is currently a grouping of just 20,000 troops, lacking discipline, training, and professionalism. As for the ministerial agents and the state and municipal police bodies, it should be recognized, without generalizing, that many are driven by corruption and not by the duty of public service, and that their decomposition puts them under the dominion of crime. The Mexican citizen is currently in a state of defenselessness. We don't have police to take care of citizens. I have always thought that in the face of the problem of insecurity, the pertinent thing is to address the causes that cause violence, and we will do so, but given the inefficiency of police corporations and the serious increase in homicides, robberies, kidnappings, femicides and other crimes, I am urgently requesting from Congress the approval of a constitutional reform that allows us to create, with the integration of the military police, the naval police and the federal police, a national guard to perform public security functions, with full respect for human rights. I know it is a controversial issue, but I have an obligation to express my point of view with realism and arguments. The armed forces are among the best institutions in Mexico. The Mexican army was established in 1913 to confront the usurping government of Victoriano Huerta. It is a revolutionary army, emerged from the people and has since experienced few breaks in its unity and discipline. The last military rebellion was that of General Saturnino Cedillo, in 1938 to 1939, and the Mexican army has never given a coup d'état to a civil authority. His loyalty to the government and his lack of ambition for economic and political power has much of his explanation, among other factors, that the Mexican army is not an elitist group, but has always nurtured the common people. The soldier is a uniformed people. Certainly not all the military have exhibited faultless behaviors, and the fact that the army has participated in acts of repression by orders of civil authorities should not be omitted. But in our military institutes no corrupted minorities have been formed, as in other areas of power, and unlike what happens in other countries, in Mexico there are no known soldiers who are part of the oligarchy. In addition, it is a fact that the army has the support of public opinion. It is an institution that throughout its history has maintained its professionalism and has been effective, without a doubt, in tasks to help the population in cases of disaster, in earthquakes, floods, hurricanes, and has provided other services to the community. The armed forces have made schools, they have universities, research centers, they have discipline and body spirit, they have maintained their nationalist vocation, and this is very important, and they have never been subordinated to any hegemony or foreign force. The same can be said of the Secretary of the Navy. Keep in mind that this unit was created in 1940, when the original Secretary of War and Navy was divided into two institutions. Thus, the Army and the Navy can be prior preparation and training for the respect of human rights, and through the application of protocols for the use of force, the fundamental institutions to guarantee national security, internal security, and security public. I add that the Peace and Security Plan includes the creation of 266 territorial coordination in the country. Every day from 6 in the morning I will preside, in the National Palace, the meeting of the Security Cabinet, in which we will receive the part or report of what happened in the last 24 hours and take the necessary measures. I add that according to our laws, the head of the executive power is the supreme commander of the armed forces, and I reaffirm the commitment that the President of Mexico will never give the order to repress the people or be complicit or concealment of possible human rights violations. Regarding foreign policy, we will adhere to the constitutional principles of non-intervention, self-determination of peoples, peaceful settlement of disputes and development cooperation. We will maintain good relations with all the peoples and governments of the world, so I appreciate the presence of Mr. Michael Pence, Vice President of the United States, and his wife, Karen Pence. And I want to point out that, since the first day of July, since the day of my election, I have received a respectful treatment from President Donald Trump, whom I am grateful to have sent his daughter Ivanka to this ceremony. The same attention I received from the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. With them, with the two presidents, with the President of the United States and with the Prime Minister of Canada, I am talking to go beyond the North American Free Trade Agreement and reach an investment agreement between companies and governments of the three nations, to boost the development of the Central American countries and also ours. And face this way, and not with coercive measures, the migratory phenomenon. I am delighted to have the presence of presidents of Latin America and the Caribbean. Mexico will not stop thinking about Simon Bolivar and José Martí, who along with Benito Juárez continue to guide with their examples of patriotism the way forward of peoples and political leaders. Thank you for being here, Jimmy Morales Cabrera, President of the neighboring Republic of Guatemala. Juan Orlando Hernández Alvarado, President of the Republic of Honduras, and his wife, Ana Garcia. Oscar Samuel Ortiz Asensio, Vice President of the Republic of El Salvador. Colville Young, Governor General also of our neighboring Republic of Belize. Miguel Diaz-Canel Bermudez, President of the Councils of State and Ministers of the Sister Republic of Cuba. Danilo Medina Sanchez, President of the Dominican Republic. Jovenel Moïse, President of the Republic of Haiti. Ivan Duque Marquez, President of the Republic of Colombia. Nicolas Maduro Moros, President of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Lenin Moreno Garces, Friend Lenin, President of the Republic of Ecuador, and his wife Rocio Gonzalez. Amigo Evo Morales, President of the Plurinational State of Bolivia. Martín Vizcarra Cornejo, President of the Republic of Peru. I appreciate the presence of Julie Payette, Governor General of Canada. Brahim Ghali, President of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. From Kim Jong-nam, President of the Republic of the Supreme People's Assembly of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Shen Yue, Vice President of the Chinese People's Assembly. I also thank, for the ties of history, culture, that unite us, the presence of Felipe VI, King of Spain. From Prime Minister Antonio Costa, of the Portuguese Republic. From Eugene Philip Ruganoth, Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs of Curaçao. Anna Berkel, Deputy Prime Minister of Romania. Lucia Topolinsky, Vice President of the Oriental Republic of Uruguay. From Gabriela Michetti, Vice President of the Republic of Argentina. From Hugo Velasquez, Vice President of the Republic of Paraguay, and his wife, Lord Samaniego. Claudia Dobles Camargo, First Lady of the Republic of Costa Rica. I thank many representatives of international organizations, governors, authorities, from several countries. Here are close friends like Miguel Angel Revilla, President of the Cantabria government, and his wife, Aurora Diaz. There is our friend, Jeremy Corbyn, Member of the Parliament of the United Kingdom, leader of the Labour Party. There is also an ambassador of poetry and congruence, Silvio Rodriguez, and his wife, Nayurka Gonzalez. Friends and friends, I came to the presidency of the Republic after many years of personal and collective struggle. Here I remember those who initiated this movement, those who sowed what we are now reaping. Social leaders, politicians, many who came before us, but were the precursors of this struggle, of this movement. We will never forget them. We arrived after many years, and in my case, as in most of those who are part of this great movement, without leaving dignity on the road, keeping our ideals, our principles high. In my case in particular, also in that of many others, women and men, my honesty, which is what I consider most important in my life. I am prepared not to fail my people. Now that I was coming here, a young man paired a bicycle and said, "You have no right to fail us." And that is the commitment I have with the people. I have no right to fail. Nothing material interests me, and I don't care about the paraphernalia of power. I have always thought that power should be exercised with wisdom and humility, and that it only acquires meaning and becomes virtue when placed at the service of others. I am aware of the great expectation that exists among Mexicans, and the challenge that it means to face the great and serious national problems, but I am optimistic and I think that we will go well. We will face the great and serious national problems well because I believe in people and in their culture, the culture of the people, of our people, the cultures of Mexico that have always been our saviors. With our cultures we have faced epidemics, earthquakes, floods, famines, invasions, civil wars, economic crises, epidemics, bad governments and other calamities, and we have always resurfaced with dignity and pride. The heritage of civilizations has forged us as a tenacious, combative, struggling, enterprising, honest people, with an exceptional idiosyncrasy of fraternity, of love of neighbor, of true solidarity. Our town is not lazy, it is not lazy, it is not indolent, on the contrary, it is one of the most hard-working societies in the world, and there is the example of our migrant countrymen who have necessarily gone to make a living in the United States and now they are sending their relatives $30 billion annually. These remittances are the main source of income of our country and the money of greater social benefit that we receive from abroad. Mexico is not the horn of abundance that its silhouette on the map seems to evoke, but still we have many natural resources, water, oil, gas, mineral deposits, winds, sun, beaches, we have forests and jungles, with good lands for agricultural and forestry production, and we are from the countries with the greatest biodiversity in the world. That is why I am optimistic. I believe that we are already achieving, it is starting and we are already on the way to achieving the renaissance of Mexico, that we will become an economic power and, above all, a model country that will be demonstrated world that ending corruption is possible, and we will do so, because that way we will build a more just, democratic, fraternal and always happy society. There are 3 things we need to face the crisis in Mexico and 2 of them are ensured beforehand. I reiterate it, a working people and enough natural wealth. Soon, very soon, we will have the 3rd thing, a good government, and in that commitment I dedicate my honor and my word. I will govern with total dedication to the public cause. I will dedicate all my time, my imagination, my effort to collect the feelings and fulfill the demands of the people. I will act without hatred, I will not hurt anyone, I will respect freedoms, I will always bet on reconciliation and I will seek that among all and by the way of concord, we will achieve the 4th transformation of public life in Mexico. Finally, just as I am a jurista and a cardinalist, I am also a maderista and a supporter of effective suffrage and non-re-election. I will work 16 hours a day to leave the transformation work in 6 years. I will do everything I can to hinder the regressions in which conservatives and corrupt will be engaged. That is why we will apply political and social changes quickly, very quickly, so that if in the future our adversaries, not our enemies, beat us, it will take a lot of work to turn back what we will already achieve. As the liberals of the 19th century would say, the Mexican liberals, may it not be easy to retrograde. But I also make it clear that under no circumstances will I be re-elected. On the contrary, I will submit to the revocation of the mandate because I wish that the people always have the reins of power in their hands. In 2.5 years there will be a consultation and citizens will be asked if they want the President of the Republic to remain in office or to ask for a license, because the people put and the people take away, and he is the only sovereign to whom I owe submission and obedience. I accept the challenge and invite you to participate to celebrate together the splendor and future greatness of our beloved Mexico. Thanks with all my heart. Hooray Mexico! Viva Mexico! Viva Mexico! From now on, a profound and radical transformation will take place because corruption and impunity will end. It will end what prevents the renaissance of Mexico, said the head of the executive. The president pledged with Mexicans to render the best accounts to Mexicans and end corruption to achieve a Mexico of peace and justice. I came to the presidency after many years of personal and collective struggle. We arrived after many years without leaving dignity along the way, keeping our ideals, our principles high. My honesty is what I consider most important in my life. I am prepared not to fail the people, he said. I pledge my honor and my word. I will govern with total surrender to the public case, he added.